Hey, welcome to Hot Takes. I'm your host, James Scott, here to analyze anything and everything interesting. Let's dig into today's topics.
Welcome back to the number one MLB podcast on the internet. You already know who it is. James, say hello to them. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's go. Today, we are clearing up some last Q&A questions. Don't forget, at the end of the episode, check our little bio. I dropped the link in there. Drop more questions. We love doing these things, but we're just going to finish up some of our last Q&A and then talk some ball. So, James, if you're ready to get started, I'm ready to fill out the questions.
Let's go.
So the last question that we didn't go over from last time in our last Q&A was someone put in, can you please talk about why you don't worry too much about players who have high strikeouts?
So I want to, preface this by saying I do worry about.
You do worry.
But it depends because there are different approaches. So for instance, if you have a patient approach, right? And you're walking a lot, you're working a lot of deep counts, and you're striking out a ton, right? Even with power, both in play and out of play, I get a little worried there because with that type of approach, you're working the count to get to hittable pitches. You're working the count to get to hittable pitches, and you're striking out a lot. Mm-hmm. So what happens when the bat speed goes and naturally that type of approach, instead of fouling off pitches, you're just swinging and missing, because instead of hitting the pitch this much, you're hitting the pitch not at all. So what ends up happening is the strikeouts go up and the walks go down, and then the strikeouts are from a high level but manageable with the amount of hard contact to unmanageable. And then you're not also working to the point in the count where you're going to be getting as many pitches that you can drive. So your power numbers are going to go down, and specifically your power numbers on hard to hit pitches are going to go down. Which means, most of the time when a patient hitter is successful against a very hard to hit pitch, it's usually not out of the ballpark, double or something like that. So what you'll end up seeing is you will see a drop in power for sure, but I think they'll become almost more of like a hitter who derives the majority of their batted ball success from what goes over the fence. And then, of course, you get to a point where the strikeouts are unmanageable. The hitter's still trying to be patient to get to, more power, right? And, because this conversion has gone on for quite some time, the success rate, like I said, on balls in play is not as much. But then eventually the success rate on balls out of play won't be as much either. Now, of course, there's all sorts of different things that a hitter can do to fight against aging. Does that mean they all do it? No. I mean, there's plenty of people where it's gotten to a point with their decline that I don't know how they'd be able to reverse it. Like Matt Carpenter, it's just worse every single year. There's no way that he can't be aware of it, and yet it still goes on. It's been going on for like 10 years now. Like since his third year in the league, something like that.
He has to be aware of it.
Yeah, he has to. He absolutely has to be aware of it. So, but there are things that certain hitters who have certain skills can do with those skills to maximize them. It's kind of like I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and we talked about the idea of clutch, and I was like, certainly players can, dial into what is known as flow state or the zone in baseball, dial into the zone, slow things down to become clutch. But it helps having the skills to make you successful in those situations, because then that is a repeated action. You become in the flow state and be able to be productive in the flow state more often because you have the skills to go along with it. And that allows you a familiarity with the flow state, which allows you to tap into it more often. So it's an interesting concept with regards to thinking about clutch. And that certainly ties into approach as well. But with regards to strikeouts, it's much more concerning a high level of strikeouts when there's a high level of walks, because when the bat speed goes, those walks are going to go into the strikeouts. foul off pitches.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably as clear as I can explain that part of the concept. The other side of it is this: if you have a guy like Baez, a guy who's swinging at everything all the time, and yet they're still able to maintain a success rate around league average, sometimes above league average in terms of WRC plus. So when you hear me saying, league average, above league average, below league average, WRC plus is what I'm talking about. But you look at a guy like Baez, he's always able to remain right around league average there or a little bit above there, despite the fact that the strikeouts are as high as they are, and they get higher seemingly every single year. At some point, it's not going to be sustainable, and it's going to knock him back into only having to use the strike zone with what he swings at. For him, though, being a guy who is nonetheless successful, swinging at all that he swings at, it doesn't disturb me that much because he hasn't gotten to the point where he can't hit those. He's hitting those pitches enough that he's able to be a successful hitter. Once he's not able to hit pitches in the other batter's box, and it forces him to have to pick out strikes, foul pitches off, maybe be a little bit more selective with what pitches he swings at. Baez has some of the best swing mechanics in the game. That's why he's able to hit all those pitches. So what Baez will be at that point, once he makes that conversion, might take a season, might take 2 seasons. But once it happens, the walks are going to go through the roof. The power is going to go through the roof. I don't think immediately there's going to be a lot of ways to get him out, mainly because it's going to be a new approach, and it's going to be from hitting everything to just hitting anything that could be a strike. So it'll be a little bit easier, I almost think, for him to drive the ball. But I think that's probably why I like Baez so much, is that with his bat speed and his swing mechanics, it's going to be a few years after he adapts a patient approach for, I think, pitchers to find a way to get him out. Unless the way to get those players who make that type of adjustment in their career out is to just vary timing, fastball, changeup, and things like that, which is an interesting concept, that's your way of getting those types of guys out. But I don't know. I think guys who have that fundamental of a swing, they'll probably find a way to be able to adjust to that as well. So specifically, that is why I am not worried about players who strike out, who are aggressive, if they're being successful, if they're performing consistently successful, if they're consistently, then being aggressive is even better. I mean, you put a guy who's aggressive in a lineup with lineup protection, because they're being aggressive, any of the extra pitches that they would get to hit, they're not going to miss. That's how they are. They get a pitch to hit in the zone or not in the zone, and they're swinging at it because it's a pitch they see to hit. And if you're able to perform at league average or above league average with that kind of approach, you get them lineup protection. Maybe put a guy like that in a ballpark that's going to help him, be it Yankee Stadium if you're a lefty, be it Fenway if you're a righty, or, we could go around all sorts of teams, Colorado. There's all sorts of different little factors that you can add together to be able to figure out how players could perform in different environments. And that's fun to think about. But I like to almost think about it the other way around, which is, if you put every player in the optimal environment, which players would do the best? If every player was in the best environment for themselves, which players would do the best? And I think that's how you really figure out who the best guys are, if that makes sense. And I think that's probably as comprehensively as I can answer that question with a couple of other interesting facts around it. But yeah, that's about my answer for that question. And I especially don't like lineups that have a lot of guys who strike out in them. I think, as we've seen with the Yankees, and as we've seen with when the Braves had the Upton brothers playing for them, having too many guys that strike out, it's hot and cold. It makes the team hot and cold. And I don't think that that's a good way to win over a full year. I don't think it's sustainable, because the cold is Like, look, if you have a couple of players on your team that are hot and cold, that's awesome. Okay. A couple of guys who do that, one or two, not three, one or two. When everything else is not functioning the way it should, those types of guys that can put your team on your back and carry them for a few weeks at a time. But when those guys are not performing, I mean, they're really not performing. You know, for me, if you have a guy who's hot and cold, ideally they should add other things to the skill set. Like, be a good defender, be a good base runner, be a lefty so you hit righties, you know, whatever it ends up being. But routinely, you know, you'll find guys who don't give you that. So but yeah, I don't want to get too much into that. That's my answer. That's my answer. Okay. That's my answer to the strikeout question. You don't want to have too many people who strike out in your lineup. Ideally, you have guys who, if they strike out, are aggressive. And if they strike out and they're patient, hopefully you don't have them through like age 35, 36. Because things could get bad at that point. But if you have them for their prime while they're doing that, that's fine. But again, don't go with a whole lineup of these guys. Even if they're all aggressive and they're all striking out at a high rate, I still am not okay with that. You do not want a ton of strikeouts in your lineup, point blank.
I agree. I mean, I totally agree.
So that's my answer to that.
Other than that, James, let's just take a few minutes. Let's talk ball.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, we got the Texas Rangers Yankees game on here. And similar to Baltimore, you know, the Yankees should, in theory, be walking all over the Rangers. You know, Baltimore and the Rangers are two of the bottom teams in baseball, two of the worst teams in the entire league. And once again, it's a close game. Like,
I
mean,
it was 0-0. Is it still 0-0 right now? Let me check.
It's 1-0.
It's 1-0.
The Yankees are winning by 1 run. And you know, again, I should give credit where credit's due. The Rangers have Dane Dunning pitching, top prospect. He's got a good breaking ball. The Yankees aren't very familiar with him. Those types of guys, the Yankees don't hit very well against. Maybe they'll do well against the Pen. That's probably what ends up happening here. Pen will come in and they'll wipe them out. But you know, it's interesting. We were talking. Oh, is that a homer? Oh, that's a dinger. That's a dinger. Let's go, baby. Let's go. Let's go. Up that trade value, Stanton. Up the trade value. Up it. Boone, you better start playing him in the outfield. He'll hit more. Yeah, it's too late anyways. I've given up on the season. I've given up on the season. I'm just having fun. I'm just enjoying.
You got to, but that's a good attitude to have. I've known so many fans that just like get so annoyed and so like angry towards the end of the season instead of having fun. So that's the kind of attitude you got to bring. You know what I mean?
Well, for me, it's like, you know, I grew up watching. Okay, look, I'm 29 years old, so I'm born in 92. You know, 96, I was 4 years old. 98, you know, a lot of these years I didn't remember them. Okay, 99, 2000. My first year that I really concretely remember the end of it, 2001, and I think that's when I really officially became a fan. Cried my eyes out when the Diamondbacks, you know, whooped us in the World Series. And then the next year comes around and I'm like, wow, the Yankees don't even come close to the World Series. You know, this is not good. You know, there needs to be some serious course correction. You know, little did I know that, like, why should anyone expect their baseball team to be in the World Series every year? You know, when you're a kid and you see it that much, you're naive and you get tricked, and it's a nice little feeling that no one else will ever be able to experience. You know, the Yankee fans know this, who were born in that period of time, that like we only notice now how like privileged we were. You know, But I digress. We're talking about. I was tracing this back to when I became like a fan, when I really got into it.
Yeah.
It must have been 2000 and 2004. Then 2003, the Marlins whooped us. 2004, the Red Sox whooped us. 2005 was an ugly year. 2006 was an ugly year. 2007 was a very ugly year. 2008 was an ugly year. 2009 they won the World Series. It was amazing. 2010 mistakes were made. 2011 mistakes were made. 2012 again another really good team, but people got injured near the end and it never ended up really coming together, which was unfortunate, but it happens. But then 2013 happens, 2014 happens, and they don't do anything in those years. Terrible Yankees teams in those years. And then, you have 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, everything starts to come together, and I think they had the balance to win a World Series. And what ended up happening was the Astros did what they did. Cheating Astros. It's always going to.
We always
every
gotta,
episode.
every episode. There's not every episode, every live stream. It just never. We never get past. I think there was only one in the history of this podcast. There's only been one episode where you did not mention it, and the second we stopped recording, I was like, "You forgot to mention the Astro."
Yeah. And, but, it's interesting with this lineup, right? The lineup that the Yankees have right now, it's very reminiscent of a lot of the lineups that the Yankees had between the years of like 2002 and like 2008. It's just a whole bunch of power hitters, a lot of flaws, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of issues with the team. And I just, it's a little bit maddening for me.
Why?
Because they had the right manager. Okay. They had the right balance. They had all of the right young players coming through their system. They had players developing at the big league level. And they ruined it. Like that, there's not a lot of ways around it. And if that's just the truth of the matter, that the contention window was kind of crushed, Boone being probably part of it. But also like, not having the right balanced team, like having way too many strikeouts, having a lot of these issues, right? I think, a pessimistic fan is getting all angry right now. A pessimistic fan is looking at things right now and they're getting heated. And for me, I look at Yankee fans who get heated and are upset about how everything is going right now. And I'm just like, I think we need to really refigure out how to look at a baseball team, because we're not going to go to a World Series every single year. And if this team is going to get to that point in time where they're winning World Series, we need to understand what that looks like. A World Series winning team looks like the Dodgers right now. That's what a World Series winner looks like. They have speed, they have average, they have power, they have lefties, they have righties, they have pitching, they have dynamic pitching. They have multiple aces. They have depth. They have people that they can trade to improve their team. That's what you want to have. The Yankees right now, to me, look a little bit behind that point, a couple of steps behind that point. And they look like they're trying to compete at that point. Guys like having LeMahieu here, having Stanton here, like Britton and Chapman. I mean, all of these, and then going out and getting Cole, having Judge. Like, I think a lot of this gave the appearance that the Yankees are a juggernaut now. And I think that if we're being truthful, Torres hasn't developed yet. If we're being truthful, Sanchez hasn't come around and gotten to his prime yet. Florial, he's a couple of years away, but his prime is going to coincide with both Sanchez and Torres. Luke Voit probably has 6 more middle of the order seasons in him. He's age 30, maybe 5 more, at minimum 4 more. Hicks is under contract for a little bit, and I know he's the oldest of the entire group. He's 32. I see him being effective until probably 34, 35. So couple more years out of him, especially because he gives the team a lot of the issue. He fills a lot of the issues. He fixes a lot of them. Same thing with Odor. Both of them are fantastic balancing pieces. But moving around the roster, Dominguez, you're going to want him up and contributing by the time this next championship comes around. The door's not entirely closed on Frazier. The door's not entirely closed on Andahal. If either of those guys pan out, that's another guy whose prime is going to be within those years. I think Tyone, his best years are going to be within those years. I think Cole's still going to be an ace within all of those years. I think Montgomery's best years are going to be within those years. I think most of the people that are going to be bullpen arms or could be bullpen arms for the Yankees, once Britton moves on, once Green moves on, once Chapman moves on, most of those guys are going to peak within those years as well. So as Yankee fans, it may suck to hear this, but you may have to understand that this team is still growing and coming together, figuring out who they are. And it might take a little bit. I trust Cashman to not trade the wrong people. I'll give an example, I thought even Didi getting traded was a bad idea. I thought it was a bad idea. But if you look at what Didi's done since he's left, he can't hit, and he's the worst defensive player at shortstop in the major leagues. Now, given his swing, and given that he's a lefty, and given that in his past he'd swing at everything, and he'd make a high level of contact, and he'd do very well because balls would come off his bat at just the right angles. I think that if he decides to maybe play a less demanding position, where he can focus more on putting on muscle and becoming, the hitter he used to be, I think the defense gets better. I think he'd be a better defender in the outfield. I think he'd be a much better defender in the outfield. I think he'd be a much better defender at third or at second. The outfield lets him concentrate the most on the bat, though. If you don't think that the bat's going to come forward unless he's really focusing on it, make him a center fielder. I've always believed in his tools, in his swing, in him. So I think Didi in a few years, he'll get it all together within the next couple of years, 100%. But if you looked at when the Yankees got rid of him, it coincided right with his drop off. And I think that that's the case with a lot of the people that the Yankees have kind of gotten rid of over the ages. There's not a lot of people who the Yankees have gotten rid of who've been better after they've left. So yeah, I think if the Yankees can make sure that they can bring back Sanchez and at least get Judge, or get Judge when he's a free agent, and re-sign him, then I think that I feel comfortable with this team moving forward. A lot of people can walk from this team as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I think that the best way to be is to be looking forward and being optimistic about things. And as optimistic as I can be is that the Yankees have a lot of pieces for the future, and they have a lot of trade chips to put them in a position where they maybe could be where the Dodgers are. But the Yankees have to be smart with their trade chips. Like Stanton's worked back a lot of value. If you're going to try and trade anything like that, you're going to have a lot of guys in the trade who aren't being paid very much at all, but are really talented and are under contract long term to offset somebody like Stanton's salary. I think it'll have to be multiple players. But Stanton really has proved that he's the same guy. Same guy he was in Miami. Health not really an issue. Good corner outfield defense. Teams should want him. I'd understand being wary of the price, and I'd understand being wary of him, for the ages that he's going to be under contract. But that's why, you get a guy in the deal who is under contract for not very much, who's under contract for many years, and who's really talented because it offsets Stanton. Um, that's a deal that has to happen. I think you probably should package Chapman and Green into the same trade. Um, bill it as fixing up someone's bullpen. Someone will be like, "Oh yeah, heck yeah, I'll take two really good relievers. One of them being, a risk, Chapman, under contract only for one more year, but that dissipates the risk. It's only 1 year under contract, and then the other one, Green, I believe he's under contract for 2 years, I think. So you have a little bit longer with him, but he's also a little bit more proven to be consistent recently than Chapman has. But yeah, definitely a team would be interested in like two stud relievers, one righty, one lefty. Both of them strike a bunch of guys out. So that's another trade. So you have the Stanton one, you have that one. Maybe you package Gallo and Urshela together as a left side fixed trade. There's going to be teams that would love that, given the defense of Urshela and Gallo, and given the fact that their skills complement each other. Urshela aggressive, Gallo patient. Urshela contact skills, all fields hitter. Gallo pull power, patient, walks a bunch. Like I said, Urshela lefty, Gallo righty. And then also Gallo's a good base runner for Urshela's singles. So they complement each other there. They're both phenomenal defenders. Like, I don't know, if I'm a team and I don't have a left fielder and I don't have a third baseman and that's being offered, that's my number one. I go right after that. And then the fourth trade, and this one's going to be a little bit hard to stomach, but the Yankees have done trades like this before. And frankly, there's going to need to be more room in the outfield. The Yankees are going to need to give Florial at bats, Frazier, Andahar if they can get the at bats. Hicks will be back. Gardner's only effective if he plays every day, and that will allow him to be effective in the second half of the season. I think the Yankees have to do something really extreme here, and I wouldn't say this unless I really fully believe that the Yankees can absolutely re-sign him off of free agency. Is I think they have to pull a Chapman, which they had Chapman, and then they traded him to the Cubs for Gleyber Torres, and then they re-signed Chapman in the offseason. I think that's what you're going to have to do with Aaron Judge. Judge is a superstar. Judge is as good as they get, really, type player. You could get a ton in a trade with him. You package him with someone like Austin Wells or some minor leaguer, you can get a ton in return for him. And then when he hits free agency in a year, you just go out and re-sign him. You go give him that contract. And you might end up with two players rather than one. So I think these are drastic moves. These are 4 separate trades that the Yankees have to really think about executing on. But I think a lot of the trades could fill a lot of the issues, that the Yankees have. So I think the only way to think about things moving forward is, instead of be like, oh, it all fell apart, it didn't work, is, well, this team has even more trade chips, and Cashman's expertise is trading. So, there you go. I think that we have a really unique opportunity to reassess and realize that, the real window for this team is 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026.
Yes.
And there's just enough time to gather talent for those years. And trade guys and kind of reshape the roster. And I don't think that it's any surprise to anyone that we may need a new manager. The lineup needs to have a new configuration. It's not working. And there definitely needs to be more bullpen. And they're because Britton's out. Chapman's been inconsistent. Same thing with Green. And Loaizaga has been hurt as well. And then in addition to that, Garrett Cole can't get it done by himself. You need another ace, maybe more than one. So yeah, I think that Yankee fans need to start looking at things with new eyes, because if they do, the team that could be created of what they have at the highest levels, and mainly at the big leagues, there's really only 2 minor leaguers that they're waiting on here. Dominguez and Florial. Florial's going to be up at some point next year. So the risk is a lot lower than you'd imagine, given how a lot of these guys are in the show. I think that's what you got to capitalize around. That's what you got to build around. And I'll finish up with this one note. The Yankee fans need somebody like a Jeter. I was talking with the bros, the boys,
The boys.
the boys.
The boys.
I was talking with them about this. If the Yankees had someone like Posey or Chris Bryant or Lindor, Baez, someone like that, I think it would really guide the team. It would really pick up the team. And I think right now, the team's confidence is guided by their on-field production. It's not guided by how loose they are or how focused they are or how hard they work or how motivated they are. It's very much like, I'm going to hit a home run and then I'm going to come back in the dugout and kind of look around like, how did I do that? Or I hope I do that the next time. And you're never going to be able to perform in big moments without that kind of thing. You just won't be able to do it. You can't be coming in being like, I hope I get a pitch to hit kind of in between. You have to be hunting that pitch. You have to be confident that, oh man, I'm going to hit anything. I'm going to hit everything. I'm going to try and get me out, And there's just none of that. There's none of that. And that's what's going to happen when the whole team needs mistake pitches to hit homers. The whole team is streaky because they strike out all the time. The whole team, when everybody's healthy on the Yankees, there's not a ton of good base runners right now. So they're station to station guys. You think you drive in 2 runs and you drive in 1. It's demoralizing. And then of course the lineup changes every day, which is maddening.
And we've been over that. That's it. Yeah, that's
and then
wild.
the factors that like are very like apparent to me, like you don't want to have Judge and Stanton too close to each other in the lineup. Okay. They have similar strike zones. They're both really big power hitters. It's a little bit too consistent for a pitcher. You also don't want to have Urshela and Voit in the same lineup. They have very similar swings, and they're both the same handedness. Also, you don't want to have Urshela in the same lineup as LeMahieu because both of them are contact hitters who hit everything into the ground. Ideally, they work best with an Odor working next to them because both of them are righties. Odor is a lefty, and Odor is fast. So you could put Odor up before one of them and maximize on their singles. There's none of this type of stuff going on. Stanton, he usually needs mistakes. He needs to be in his legs. So he needs to play more in the field, and he needs to bat in the first 3 spots in the lineup all the time. Sanchez, he also needs pitches to hit. Voit, he needs to be in the first 3 spots in the lineup because he needs to be more aggressive. If he's more aggressive, he's a better hitter. But you know who they put in the top 3 spots in the lineup? They put LeMahieu there. Usually lead off. Why? Because he's a contact hitter and he'll get a pitch to hit for contact there. He's an aggressive hitter. He'll hit pitches all over the strike zone. You could put him in the bottom part of the lineup and he'd get lineup protection and he'll do just as good, maybe a little bit better, depending. The first inning, these guys are going to get pitches to hit. And at the bottom of the lineup, you got guys typically who have speed. And if they get on base, you're going to want to maximize that speed. Comes back up to the top of the lineup. You got a bunch of hitters like up there to drive them in. You should have your best hitters at the top of the lineup, but that doesn't mean that you want to go with your best of the best hitters in the first 3 because you're going to get pitches to hit in the first inning. But that's it. That's all I got to say here. It's just a mess to me. The Yankees are a mess.
Yeah. I'm surprised that it turned into a heavy Yankees episode, but I think it needed to happen because it's like although we're optimistic right now and we're like not only hopeful but still enjoying watching the games and everything, it is kind of like, we got to start thinking about the future. Like, what is next year going to look like? What is the next year going to look like? What is the year after that going to look like? And if this is something that's going to take us 3 years to make a roundabout circle change and get back on top so that we can see ourselves in a World Series, it's like, let's go. And
Yep.
not just saying the catchphrase. I'm saying like, let's go. Like we need to hit the groundwork and make it happen so that even if it takes up to 3 years to get the team
Time for
back
the
and
tough
equipped.
choices. Time
Yes,
for the tough choices.
exactly. It's we got to start thinking about the work now, and like the manager and everyone involved, like the whole team needs to sit down and they need to start making the right choices so that the main name brand, the Yankees, like the team as a whole, can see themselves circle back to what they used to be in around 2 to 3 years time. It's like it just needs to happen. The groundwork needs to happen.
Oddly enough, I think they're still going to be able to compete next year
Mhm.
and be a really good team next year. But when I say like the window is probably 2023, that's because that's when they're going to be at their best. It's going to start in the second half of 2023 and it's going to end at around 2026, 2027.
Mhm.
And that's going to be the heart of the window. And there's always ways of extending a window, but there you go.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this one. Don't forget to drop in the bio, submit your questions. Remember, every Sunday is a live stream.
Let's go.
Let's go. Stay tuned. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. We'll see you next
We'll
time.
see you then.